In 2014, off the coast of Portugal, a research vessel encountered something unprecedented. A group of sperm whales floated completely still at the surface, their massive heads pointed downward. They weren't feeding, they weren't sleeping. They were doing nothing that matched any known whale behavior. The researchers circled them for hours, but the whales remained motionless. Eventually, the team understood what they were seeing: a dead juvenile whale drifting just below the surface. About 20 adult whales were arranged in a loose circle around it, holding position in the middle of the open Atlantic. Sperm whales are among the loudest animals on Earth, communicating constantly with clicks powerful enough to stun prey. Their calls are so strong that researchers can identify individual whales by voice alone from kilometers away. But on that day, the ocean around them was completely silent. The team watched for hours. Nobody spoke much on deck either. At some point, the whales slowly, quietly dispersed. No signal anyone could detect. No obvious moment of conclusion. They were simply there, and then they weren't. Scientists call it a vigil behavior. They don't have a better word for it yet. This is the question that keeps biologists awake at night, not whether animals feel pain or fear or joy. We've mostly settled those. The harder question is whether any animal, other than us, understands that death is a permanent, inevitable, universal event. That it happens to everything and that it's going to happen to them. Because there's a massive difference between reacting to death and truly understanding it. Let's start with sea otters. A mother sea otter who loses her pup will carry the body with her for days, sometimes over a week. She grooms it, keeping it afloat on her chest the way she would a living pup, refusing to let it sink. Researchers have documented mothers losing significant body weight during these periods, so focused on carrying the body that they barely eat. At some point, the body deteriorates enough that it sinks, or she finally lets it go, and then she moves on. What is that? The easy answer is grief, but grief implies an understanding of what's been lost. The harder, more unsettling possibility is that the mother otter isn't grieving. Her brain is wired to keep the pup close, to groom it, to protect it, and that wiring doesn't have an off switch for when the pup stops moving. She might not know it's dead. She might just know something is deeply, horribly wrong, and the only thing she can do is hold on. Or she might know exactly what happened and be choosing to hold on anyway. We genuinely cannot tell which one it is. Geese mate for life. When one goose in a pair dies, the surviving goose will sometimes leave the flock entirely. These are social animals. They migrate, feed, and sleep in groups for safety. Leaving the flock is not a casual decision for a goose. It's dangerous. And yet they do it. They'll wander alone, sometimes for weeks, returning to places the pair used to frequent. Biologists following these birds have noted changes in their posture, their feeding behavior, their alertness. A grieving goose looks, by every measurable indicator, like a depressed one. But here's where it gets philosophically thorny. A goose that wanders back to a familiar pond isn't necessarily looking for its dead partner. It might just be following habit. The behavior pattern says, "Go here with mate." The mate is gone, but the behavior still fires. Is that grief? Is that memory? Is that something in between that doesn't have a name yet? Because we only have human language to describe it. In 2009, a researcher studying wild giraffes in Tanzania documented something nobody had recorded before. A mother giraffe stood over her dead calf for over 3 days. She nudged it repeatedly with her nose. She chased away any animal that came close, including hyenas substantially larger than the calf. She didn't eat. She barely moved. Other giraffes in the area would occasionally approach, lower their necks toward the calf, and stand there briefly before moving on. 3 days. For a prey animal in open savanna, standing still for 3 days is genuinely life-threatening. Predators exist, hunger compounds. Every survival instinct should be screaming at her to leave. She stayed anyway. At some point on the 4th day, she walked away and rejoined the herd. What happened in her mind between day 3 and day 4? What changed? Did something finally register? Some neurological threshold cross? Some slow-dawning realization that the calf was not going to get up? Or did she just reach the absolute limit of what her body could sustain? We don't know. And the honest thing to say is, we may never know. Here's the part that should probably bother you more than it does. The way we study animal cognition is almost entirely behavioral. We watch what animals do and work backward to figure out what they might be thinking. But behavior is a terrible window into consciousness. Humans behave in ways all the time that don't reflect what's actually happening inside them. We laugh at funerals. We feel nothing at the moment of catastrophe and fall apart 6 months later in a grocery store. We attend the burial of someone we hated and cry anyway. If aliens were studying us the way we study animals, purely through observation without access to language, they'd get a very incomplete picture of what death means to us. So, when we watch a crow funeral or a mother otter carrying a body that's been dead for a week, we're looking through a keyhole at something that might be vast on the other side. Or it might be a small room. We genuinely cannot tell. What we do know is that some animals respond to death in ways that go beyond simple instinct. Western scrub jays, small, sharp birds related to crows, have been studied specifically for this. When a jay dies near the territory of other jays, those jays will sometimes stop foraging and gather around the body, calling loudly. Researchers who played recordings of these calls found that other jays responded immediately, abandoning food to come to the site. They weren't protecting a nest. They weren't responding to a predator. They seemed to be responding specifically to the death itself, as if word needed to spread, as if the community needed to know. Whether that represents anything like human mourning is a completely separate question, but it's not nothing. These birds are doing something organized around the fact of death that serves no obvious immediate survival purpose. And that's the category that's hard to explain away. There's a concept in animal cognition research called object permanence. It's the understanding that something continues to exist even when you can't see it. Human babies develop this at around 8 months. A surprising number of animals have it too. But death is the opposite problem. It's understanding that something which was there is now permanently, irreversibly not there. Gone in a way that doesn't reverse. That's a much harder cognitive leap. And whether any non-human animal can actually make it is genuinely unresolved science. Some researchers think the otter, the goose, the giraffe, they're all operating at the level of absence. Something is missing. The circuits that expected that thing to be present are firing on nothing. It produces distress. It produces searching behavior. But it's not the same as comprehending death as a concept. Others think that's an unfairly narrow definition of understanding. That comprehension doesn't have to look the way it looks in a human brain to be real. That a goose wandering alone back to a familiar pond might be doing something that deserves the same word we use for what we do at funerals. The most unsettling case might be bees. When a bee dies inside the hive, worker bees remove the body. They carry it out and drop it at a distance. This is probably hygienic. A dead bee can spread disease. Clean enough, instinctual enough, easy to explain. But here's the part that's harder to dismiss. If you apply oleic acid, the chemical a bee's body releases when it dies, to a living bee, the workers will carry that living bee out of the hive too. While it's still moving, while it's still very much alive, they're not responding to the bee, they're responding to the chemical signal of death. They can't tell the difference. So either bees have no concept of death whatsoever and are purely running chemical programs, or the chemical program is their concept of death, and it's just built from completely different materials than ours. And somehow, that second possibility is more interesting. The idea that death might be recognized and responded to through mechanisms so different from human cognition that we don't even recognize them as cognition at all. Maybe the question, do animals understand death, is the wrong question. Understanding is a human word. It describes a human process. When we ask if an animal understands something, we're asking if they do what we do, the way we do it, using the same internal machinery. But a giraffe standing over her dead calf for 72 hours in open predator territory isn't operating in a vacuum. Something is happening there that is real, that has weight, that cost her something.